Welcome to the Free and Open Mind podcast. I am Hardy Brooklyn.
And I'm Michelle Wild.
Who are you?
And what should you be doing?
We'd like to thank headshop.com for helping make this podcast possible.
And we'd like to welcome everybody back to this episode is going to be about defining boundaries and what boundaries mean and the different types of boundaries, which ties in with change. In order, when you start to do change, there's going to be a lot of friction, and you have to define your boundaries so you can live your true, authentic self. So first, we're going to discuss defining your boundaries, and then we're going to discuss the different types of boundaries that there are out there. Emotional, material, physical, and mental.
So the first thing is, what is a boundary? And one of the definitions that we're going to go by throughout the underlining changes, boundary is a limit you can set on what you as a person will accept on another person's words or actions. Not a rule for someone else to do, but a boundary is something that you're setting on yourself that you will set as a limit that you can accept of other people's actions before you take action and make your change. Even Webster's dictionary says something such as a river, fence, or an imaginary line that shows where an area ends and another begins. It's also a point or a limit that indicates where two things become different, good feelings and bad feelings. A rule about what should not be done, limits that define acceptable behavior. Rules are not boundaries. Rules are rules on how you interact with somebody's boundaries, but they are not boundaries because boundaries are limits you set on yourself. Something that indicates or fixes a limit or an extent. How much pain will you take before you will change? How much of that? So that's just a little bit about boundaries. Is a boundary a wall around a castle? Yeah. Is a boundary you saying that I'm not going to hang out with people that don't wear masks?
Yes, that is a boundary.
But that's something that you're choosing to do.
I have a boundary. I don't do friends with benefits. That's a boundary for me. Big, huge boundary for me. So we either we're friends or we're something more than that. That's my boundary that I define for myself.
So what does that mean if we start to unpack the statements that we've just made? It's we don't interact with people that act in a certain way. That's what we're defining. We're saying that we choose to put ourselves in a situation. What that situation comprises of and takes care of, we control that. Nobody else controls that. We are the only ones that can control that. So, friends with benefits, what does that mean? That means we're just friends that have benefits. And what are those benefits? Those benefits are designed by your relationship and your boundaries and your interactions. So they could be sexual benefits. They could be financial benefits. We have to define what those benefits and what the context those benefits are, and then we can define how we're going to interact with them. An example of friends with benefits, and let's take sexual for a good example, because we're adults here, and that's the biggest one that everybody hopes for.
Right.
I want every friend with benefits. And people come to me and they're amazed. Wow, you're friends with girls and there's no sex involved? And I'm like, you don't have to always have sex with everybody. People can fulfill different roles in your life. And there are people that, fulfill an amazing sex role in my life. And there are people that fulfill great companionship and going clubbing. And different things in my life are fulfilled by different people because I've created boundaries. And I don't interact with certain people. So I have boundaries as well. But let's unpack that friends with benefits. So what happens in a situation where someone wants to be a friend with benefits but doesn't want to go more than that? They want to be just a friend with benefits.
Well, for me, initially, it used to really, really bother me. I couldn't understand why the word friends and something sexual together was a big, huge trigger for me. And then I just realized it's just a boundary. It's just something that doesn't work well for who I am, doesn't work well for, my emotional well-being and my mental well-being. Those two words do not go well for me. So I had to define a boundary and say to somebody, I don't want, which happened very recently, happened last week, that, I really like you and I really love being with you, but I don't want to just have sex and let's just be friends. So at first it would get me really mad, and I'd be mad at the other person, right? Because I'd be like, well, hi. And then I realized they don't know my boundaries. So how can I be mad at them if I haven't defined my own boundary in my own head and said, listen, this is a line that once that person crosses it, I have to tell them, you know what, you need to step back, cross over that line. It doesn't, it changes our friendship, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to stop being friends with this person. It doesn't mean that this relationship couldn't go someplace else. That's just one line that I've defined that I just feel like it just doesn't work for me. So I pushed him back over the line, and everything is fine. Now I feel better. He's never going to mention it ever again, and I won't have to deal with it ever again with him. But if this does become something more and romantic, at least he understands my values, where I stand, and what I believe in, and then I'm willing to, say, hey, listen, I don't want you to cross that line.
It's very important when somebody says a boundary to you or says that there's a line that makes them uncomfortable and not feel right, that you honor that and not discount it, because when you have those same lines, you're going to want people to honor your boundaries and your likes and your dislikes and all of that the same exact way. So we have to really think about it, that when we're defining those boundaries, we don't have to justify to anybody. But the one thing I do say to people is, when you're creating and you're defining a boundary, whether it's a door to your house, whether it's I don't play with people that don't wear masks, or I only go to dinner with people that wear gloves. In the changing days of worlds and viruses and things that happen, everybody's boundaries are going to constantly be in flux.
Yeah.
Because before this, I had no problem walking into a packed venue or a packed club and hugging everybody and having people blow on me and spit on me. But I don't know when I'm going to feel comfortable putting myself in a situation like that, even though that was my main source of income, was throwing events and getting people together or going to those things. Because I have a personal safety boundary that I've created. And if I want people to respect that boundary that I've created, I have to respect other people's boundaries in the same way. And you have to respect other people's as well. And for one thing, when I'm figuring out a boundary, I fundamentally have to figure out where, for me, that's coming from.
Yes. Well, that was the other thing I was going to say. One of the things initially was, when he said that to me, I was, like I said, really angry, and I was angry at him, and I was questioning, well, why am I angry at him? Like, why am I looking at, why is it bothering me? Why is it upsetting me? It's not about him, because it doesn't make a difference who the him is, who says it, it's when it's been said to me that it just really triggers me. So I have to sit and figure out what it is, and for me, because on a personal level, it just doesn't, being a friend is like, I have so many friends. That doesn't mean, it doesn't make it special, and then that doesn't justify me having sex with you. If it's just going to be like, whatever, that's not good enough for me. That just doesn't work for me. So I had to really sit and think about that and understand that I'm not really angry at him. I, again, was angry at myself for not saying, hey, listen, this doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work for me. So, and like I said, I told him, and he said, that's fine. I respect that. I get your point of view, and understood.
For a lot of people, it's very easy to convey it, but there are a lot of people also that don't accept it, and you will get pushback. A lot of times, it's not as easy as that. I have friends that are like, sex and love are totally different. And yes, sex and love, in my world and in my mind, they're two totally separate things. One's a physical pleasure, and one's an emotional connection to someone. There's so many people that I love deeply that I will probably never have sex with because I'm not really in the mood, or we're not compatible, or whatever reason it might be. But it's not because of anything else as far as what society says or because society's constraints. It's just because of there's not always a compatibility there. And when you look at that and you're creating that boundary, you fundamentally want to figure out why do I connect those two together? Why do I create those dependencies? Because that will help your change. And then if you understand where the boundary is coming from and what the rationale behind the boundary is, it makes it so much easier for you to enforce. And because it's not somebody else enforcing it. It's something that's invisible. It's something that doesn't exist. It's something that really does truly exist, but it exists only in your mind because it's not like a fence. It's not like a river. It's not like a stoplight. It's something that makes you feel not so good, or you feel really good when you enforce it. And communicating that to people made Michelle feel really good because he didn't react negatively. But in the lifestyle that we live, I could have easily seen it go the other way. Oh, what do you mean? We can easily sleep. Or no, it's acceptable. Everybody else is doing it.
Well,
or whatever
and,
reason.
and that's has happened to me before. And it's just like, then we're just not going to be friends then. If that's your motivation behind being a friend with me, then I'm just not feeling that. So then, now I know, we're just not meant for each other. We're not meant to be friends. We're not meant to be anything at all.
That's very important, is that when you're creating your boundaries,
right,
they are going to allow you to put the people that are more like you and more like-minded like you closer to you and more around you, and take the people that are not as like-minded as you or that don't agree with you, and they will become distant. And you know what? Don't be stuck on comparing their life to your life or your life to their life, and still allow the change to happen and allow you to be true to who you are, and not be feeling like, oh, everybody's doing it or this or whatever justification somebody's giving you because your boundary is wrong. That's not valid. Your boundary is your feeling, and it's your situation, it's your mental state, it's your everything that you took combined. It's not about them, it's about you.
And people need to respect that, and if they can't respect that, then they don't respect you. That's the bottom line. I mean, if they're going to give you a hard time and give you pushback, then they're not respecting you. And you don't really want to be around people like that don't value you for your boundaries and who you are. I mean, right? Am I right?
I completely
I mean, and it happens all the time. I mean, guys, over push their boundaries and all kinds of situations because they feel entitled to, have sex with a woman, right? When you said no, and they're just like, but there is no but. There is no but. There is no but. This is, the line I created. And the other aspect of what I was said initially is that I was angry at him. And you have to stop and think, and because I heard he had another podcast where he was discussing boundaries, and he brought something up, and I realized all of a sudden it clicked. Why am I angry at him? Why would I be angry at him when he doesn't even know? I mean, come on, that's not even being fair to him or to me. You know what I mean? So I had to sit and really think about it, and that's when I actually said, you know what, I have to say something. And it was, for me, it wasn't really scary. I'm, pretty much able to say and be pretty forthright at this point in my life. But at one point in my life, it would have been a scary thing to do because I'd be afraid, oh my God, I'm going to lose him as a friend. But then I think if I lost him as a friend, was he really a friend to begin with?
And that's what you have to think about. I have so many people that I work with, so many friends, so many clients that are so afraid that when they create boundaries, they're going to push family members away. And a lot of times, the family that you were born to is not your true family. And you have to think about it. I didn't talk to my parents for approximately 2 years. And I was to somebody that talked to my parents on a regular basis. When I started creating the boundaries in my life and started creating different things that made me feel comfortable for who I truly was and what I truly was and who I wanted to become. I went from corporate, conservative, outward-facing person to colorful, fun-loving, nurturing person in a matter of 4 years. And during that transition, it was really hard because my parents thought of me a certain way because of a construct that they were raised, that they had conveyed on me, and that they were always going to interact with me in a certain way. And I was able to say, listen, I am my own person. You don't interact with me the same way you interact with my brother. You don't interact with me the same way you interact with my father. We're all different people. And I'm going to act a certain way. And you know what? If you don't like the way I raise my kids, if you don't like the fact that I don't own a house, if you don't like the fact that I smoke weed, I have a boundary. I don't put myself around people that are constantly critical of me. You need to take a step back and be able to come back to me when you're not going to violate that boundary. And they tried many times, and I literally got up and left. And then we got to the point where my mom criticizes me for smoking now, and her new criticism is you should eat it, don't smoke it, which is way better. But it's That's the only criticism that's left. She no longer criticizes me for the way I dress. She no longer criticizes me for who I hang out with or who I do, because I set a boundary, and she knows that if she violates that, I don't ask her to leave, I leave, because the boundary is placed on me.
So let's discuss some of the types of boundaries that we kind of covered a little bit in this, defining them. So the different types of boundaries are material, mental, emotional, and physical, sexually. So let's start with material.
And the reason why I choose to start with material, because it's the easiest one to convey to people and fundamentally understand from a point of the difference between a rule and a boundary. So what is a material boundary? Material boundary is something that's physically tangible. And a good example of a boundary that we have is two typical things for most people in the world that don't live in big cities. One is everybody has a cell phone. And most people have a car or a truck or something that live in the suburbs. So I have a cell phone. What am I comfortable doing when I lend that cell phone to someone? That's a good thing. It's a material thing. It's mine. How much am I prepared and comfortable having this device out of my home?
And someone else having the passcode.
Correct. So what am I okay with? There are certain people in my life that I can give my friend Dana or Rachel or Jean the cell phone or Michelle with the passcode for a whole day, and I'm not going to feel unokay. Anybody else, I'm going to feel really unokay. Why? I don't know why, but we all know why. So, but there's a certain amount of material things that we're connecting to that makes us feel okay. And if we think about the same thing with our truck or our car or whatever it is, when we're lending it, when we're lending with our truck out, are we comfortable lending it to people that'll give it back dinged up and not say anything? Are we comfortable lending it to people that'll fill it back up with gas? Are we comfortable with people that'll give us a week or two notice before I need to? And how are those people going to react to us?
Right, instead of getting mad at them. Instead of getting mad at them and saying, hey, listen, you didn't bring that car back that you borrowed. You didn't put a full gas a tank in it when you returned it. When you, in fact, had to define that boundary. Listen, I'm letting you borrow my car. That's fine, but you have to put gas in it when you come back. Getting angry after the fact, as yelling at somebody that they didn't know, or you yourself haven't defined.
And also, even if they don't fill it up and they bring it back, or they don't put gas in and they don't ding it up, it's okay to get annoyed with them or angry with them. But the one thing that you have to realize is they now violated your boundary. They now violated what made you feel good. They now violated what made you feel comfortable. So how are you going to react to that? What's the reaction? Is the boundary going to be, I don't lend my car to people that do that? Or is my boundary going to be, let's get into a nasty rule battle and a yelling match? And I tell people the best thing to do is say, hey, you violated my boundary. I don't lend cars to people. And then that's it. You don't need to lend it. You don't need to be liked.
And there's no point in getting angry. You're going to be yelling at that person for what? There's going to be no end result. The end result is you still didn't get that gas tank, right?
Or your car still got dinged up. They might have paid for it after you had a 6-hour fight and you had a big yelling match, but what's the fundamental reason behind that? Because it's not going to change that person's behavior.
So then there goes that you learn to have people around you that respect you and respect your boundaries. So if that person doesn't respect your boundary, regardless how good in front of they are to you, you need to have a mental note. Listen, this person disrespected my boundaries, to be a little cautious about.
Think about it like somebody's okay walking into your house and taking up a physical book and ripping that up. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with how people treat your tangible goods? Are you okay with how much are you okay with lending your time to people? Do you constantly want to be running down the block to help Michelle fill up her bath whenever she wants to have a bath because, I don't know, because you're a nice person and you think you're going to get lucky with her? Is that like her violating your boundary? Or are you okay with that? And you have to figure out what your limit on, hey, how much time am I going to give Michelle to fill up her bath this much? How much time am I going to give Patty fixing her light? How much time am I going to give Peter working on his report card? How much time am I going to spend editing this podcast? So we have to put limits on our time also, because those are also boundaries, because if we don't put limits, people take advantage of it. And we see that all, whether it's favors or helping somebody out, whether it's lending them that truck over and over again and constantly getting it returned with no gas after he took it to California and back, you know. Think about whether we're being taken advantage of, and when we don't feel good or we feel that, that's when we have to create a boundary.
Right. Yes, I agree. So it's like if you want to get angry at the person because they didn't return the car with the gas tank full, my best advice is you walk away, regroup for a moment, and like really think, why am I really angry? Am I really angry at him, or am I angry because he disrespected my boundary, right? And there's nothing that's going to change that. He just totally overstepped overstepped the line, and now I just need to tell him, listen, you overstepped my boundary, right? I don't want it to happen again, and I'm not going to lend you my car again because you can't respect that.
And you as an individual have to decide how many times you're going to let somebody step on your boundary. And when we look at that, the hardest ones are the mental boundaries, because it's our thoughts, it's our values, it's our opinions, and it's our beliefs. And all of those things come to us from my mommy, my daddy, my grandma, my grandpa, my teachers. Everything that made you who you are today created your mental state of mind. And everybody has very different mental states of mind. I have different thoughts about things. I have a different value system than everybody out there. My opinions on things, people say you're crazy because I look at them from a different point of view. And I have a different belief system. I don't believe in God. I don't believe God even exists, because where is he? You know, God's going to save us. Good luck with that. But it's a belief system that I've created because of what I've experienced in my life, and I have every right to have that belief system. And if you believe in God and you believe God is there, you have every right to believe that, because that's what you believe in. And when we start setting our boundaries, it's very important that we think about not allowing people to constantly criticize, put down, undermine, passively aggressively disrupt our mental state. Are they gaslighting us when they're thinking about our value system? You know, some people think that love and sex are very tight together. Some people don't think they go together at all. Some people think that Coke and Pepsi are the enemy. Some people think that you can have gin and tonic. Some people think you have to have gin and vodka. You know, depending on what your makeups is, you get different perceptions of things. And you have every right to have that opinion. You have every right to value money, feeling good, helping people in society. Or you have every right to be selfish if that's what you want to be. But you have to accept the consequences.
Of being selfish?
Or the values, the beliefs, and the thoughts and opinions that you choose for yourself.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I totally agree with you on that. I think also, again, I'm going to go back to, let's go for like religion. When people try to get you to convert or tell you there's God or like all this other stuff, and when you tell them, all you have to say, you don't have to get angry, you don't have to get into a heated discussion, is I have a boundary, like I do. One of them is politics. I don't discuss politics. I've had many people ask me why, and I'm like, I just don't discuss politics. I just don't. You know, because I know my point of view and my values and my beliefs don't really gel with most of the people I meet. You know, most of the friends that I have the same, train of thought. But when I meet other people, it's a hard boundary for me. I'm not going to discuss it because I'm not going to sit here and get to an argument and a heated discussion because you believe X and I believe Y.
And everybody is going to run into that constantly in your life, because everybody believes things very differently. I mean, I believe things very differently than my wife believes things. But there's a lot of things that we're together on. Me and Michelle have very different beliefs on a lot of things. But there are things that we come close together in. You don't have to match. And you don't have to have all the same beliefs. You don't have to have all the same values. You don't have to have all the same opinions to match and all the same thoughts. But you have to have some kind of common ground.
You do have to have a common ground, but you can also, agree to disagree. Like we can have two different opinions, and we can have an open discussion about it, and respect each other's and try to see each other's, points of view. But in the same respect, you can't, like about politics. I just don't I don't want to talk about it. But I'll talk about it if you just want to have a casual conversation.
Right.
But not if we're going to have some heated discussion about how I'm wrong for not liking a certain president or how I'm right for liking another, a governor or something. I don't want you to criticize my beliefs. So that's why I make it a boundary for myself.
And it's very important to realize it's also what's happening is then you're taking negative energy out of the situation, because when we talk about politics, or if we set a boundary of we're not going to talk about politics until we get to know you, and I don't lead with politics because 99% of the people that I run into have very different political opinions.
And then it becomes this huge, heated argument, and I'm like, I don't want to. I'm wasting negative energy on something that's going to go absolutely nowhere unless you're open enough to listen to my point of view.
And we as humans are not. We as humans, especially on the political spectrum, have been trained and taught and constantly told the opposite, that there's no gray, it's either good or bad. And that really leads us into my emotions, because all of these things, whether it's my physical things that I'm getting, whether it's my paper, my phone, my truck, or my car, it's going to create an emotional state and the mental state as well. So I have to also create emotional boundaries. Am I going to become codependent on someone else? Am I going to only let my feelings be dependent on how I can make that person feel? If that person feels bad, do I feel bad? And is it my job to make that other person feel better? Or
that's a biggie.
Or am I being aware of my own feelings and separating them from the people around me? Because so many times I go out and I sit there and I'm like, wow, I'm having a great time. And everybody else is like, man, tonight sucked. Tonight was really horrible. And then I start talking around to it and I find out that like Billy got fired today, or somebody's mother died. And what happened was that person that had bad mojo constantly was conveying that to people around them. And everybody was unable to protect themselves because they just got absorbed in it. Instead of being like, hey, I feel bad for you, or whatever the situation was, and moved on, they allowed themselves to be affected and changed by the negative energy, because we're so taught to go negative.
Well, and also just to say, hey, listen, I'm sorry that happened to you. But right now is not the time. That's a boundary. I'm out having a good time, and this is a boundary for me to talk about serious stuff while I'm out in this atmosphere. You know what I mean? So you do have boundaries, but I'm very vocal about my boundaries, and I've pretty much always been, not all of them, but most of them. And I would always get, well, you're such a bitch. No, because I don't want to discuss something right now. I'm a bitch. Because I've set a boundary that I realize whatever's going to come out of your mouth is going to be really negative and really bad, and I really don't want to absorb that right now.
And for Hardy, it was really, when I started setting boundaries, probably decently about 2 years ago, it was incredibly hard because I was setting them with myself, because what I would do, as people would say, is I would shut down. So I would either go to the bathroom, or I would leave, or I would go outside for a 2-hour cigarette smoke. I would do or create activities that were fundamentally creating that boundary because I wasn't feeling great, but I wasn't conveying them to people, and I wasn't conveying them to myself. When I started conveying them to myself, it really fundamentally made me think about situations I was putting myself in and how people were reacting to those boundaries. So when I go out at night, I don't really have serious discussions. I don't really talk business. I'll talk fluff business, but not the meat and the bones is like why businesses fundamentally are doing and making decisions, or conspiracy theories. Because I know that everybody's got their own views, and everybody's got their own baggage, and they've got their own backstory. So if we want to talk about, let's say, where black tires came from, I have a million friends that can have a million different opinions on where black tires came from. Some are going to be like, oh, it's just from the oil. And then somebody's going to be like, well, oil isn't normally black. And then somebody's like, well, there's no oil in tires, it's rubber. And we're going to go through this conversation. It's going to be an iteration of negative energy, because ultimately, because of the way humans are, everybody's going to try to one-up each other. And I see this more and more now. It's more and more apparent with Zoom. Because I can watch when my son's on a Zoom or my wife's on a Zoom through the back of an eye, or I can step into a Zoom that I'm maybe not sharing my video or not watching or being able to observe people in a different mannerism and seeing that and allowing people's feelings not to be dependent on others and not for you to try to change other people because you can't control the way anyone else feels. You can only control the way you feel in your own emotions.
So that goes into the next one for the type of boundaries, emotional boundaries, right? So you were saying about emotional boundaries. So that's what I was discussing more, friends with benefits. That's like an emotional boundary because it's an emotional trigger for me, right? So it's a boundary, like I said, I put up that I just don't want to engage with somebody because, so, you know what, actually maybe you should explain it.
So
emotionally, as far as...
A great example is husband and wives.
Okay.
That's a really good example of what emotional, codependent, dependent boundaries, situations are. You know, the wife is home all day. She's miserable. She didn't get to go out. The husband interacted with 30,000 people. He had a fun day. He had a great cocktail lunch. He had a great conversation with somebody on the subway on the way home. But yet the wife was stuck home, making dinner, cleaning the house, doing email, whatever she was doing, and dealing with, you know, the 3 kids screaming and yelling. Husband gets home. He's all cheery. He's got feeling so great. He's on top of the world. Nothing can stop him. First thing happens, he walks in the door. Honey, deal with the fucking kids. The action and the energy that came from that energy in that statement instantly deflates the husband. Oh my God, why do I want to come home now? It creates negative energy. Husband decides 6 months down the line to leave because every time he came home, the wife is frustrated. I've been dealing with the kids all day. Why do you have a chance to be out of the house? All of these other things get built up. How do we prevent that? Husband comes home. Wife screams at him. Whoa! Stop. Full stop. What do? We have to unpack the situation. We have to see what's creating this dependency. Why is she passing and transferring all of that negative energy to him? And what is that negative energy that's being transferred that's causing him to not want to be there, where setting a boundary would have prevented the departure or prevented the arguing? So how do we fundamentally sit down and set that boundary with ourselves? Well, we have to figure it out. Well, I don't want to be around someone that's going to throw all this negative stuff at me. Well, guess what? We have to change our behavior because that person that's throwing that negative energy at us is not going to change. And to expect them to change is foolish.
Right.
And to leave is foolish. Because fundamentally, why is this happening? The wife is miserable because she did not sign up for it, or she did not expect to be stuck in the house all day dealing with 3 kids coming home from school and cleaning up because she doesn't probably feel whatever it means. Whether she doesn't feel valued, she doesn't feel appreciated, she doesn't feel independent, whatever reasoning it may be, and we can go through thousands of reasons why she's in that situation. How do we diffuse that situation when I get home so that I can put a boundary up? Hey, hon, I know that every day that I come home, you want me to deal with the kids. So what do I say? What do I notice to start that change and start to set my boundary? Hon, when I come home, all I want you to do is say, I missed you, I'm lonely, give me a hug. And I know that that means that from that point forward, I need to give you my attention and take the children's attention off of you and take that burden off of you. So while we're setting the boundary for ourselves, we need to be proactive and put people in, always put somebody in a situation where they're going to constantly violate that boundary. And if they are going to be violating that boundary, we have to set that boundary to ourselves and to them and define a preferred and alternative action. So, hon, don't yell at me. I know every day you've been stressed with the kids. Leave me fucking Post-it notes. But be nice. Don't be angry at me because we're in this together. I'm the one that's going to work. You know what, frankly? I'd rather be home with the kids partying because I would rather not be dealing with office politics. So try when you're creating that boundary to figure out a way of getting around it. So now when we come home, the wife is like so happy to see the husband because the expectation is he's going to give her attention, and the thing that's been driving her crazy, he's going to take off her hands for a little bit. And maybe he's going to make dinner one day a week. It doesn't matter what it is.
She needs to change then too.
but she's not. But we can't expect other people to change.
No, I know.
We have to change our behavior and our interactions.
So yeah, for every action there's a reaction, right?
And we
so if he does something different, then she'll do something different.
Correct. If I come home and I say as soon as I walked in the house,
well, and you acknowledge her. Hey, I'm really sorry. You had a really rough day with the kids.
Right. Hey, kids, before she has a chance to scream. You can, or even a good thing now with technology, every kid has a cell phone. Text your kids on the way home and say, hey, I'm on my way home, give mommy a break, meet me in the living room, or go to your room and do your homework, or I'll deal with it, don't bother you. Because when you do those things, and you set those boundaries, and you become more proactive, people will respect your boundaries, and people will, guess what, start to want to set boundaries themselves. And what's the reasoning that they'll do that? Because they'll start to see them being effective, they'll start to seeing them done right, and they'll start to being them done without anger, and they'll start to seeing them done consistently, and they'll start to see them done not for politics.
And the most important thing, you're being authentic and true to yourself, right?
Yes, and it by far, I mean, the way that me and my mom react today is so much better than it was years ago. There's no, and respect has come. She respects me for doing something that she doesn't even understand now, because I'm not borrowing money and I'm not doing all of these other things that other children do and her friends' kids do.
So the last thing we're talking about is physical and sexual boundaries, which is pretty obvious in some respects. So what is physical and sexual boundaries?
The most important thing to realize is they're two very distinctly similar, the same things. So what's my personal space? That's a boundary. So I have a personal space boundary right now that says I will not let anybody that I do not know, that I do not have not taken their temperature, do not trust, within 6 feet of me. When 3 months ago, you can ask Michelle, I didn't care if you were leaning on top of me. But now I want my personal space because that's what makes me feel comfortable and safe. Now, when it comes to touching me, I used to be okay with a lot more touching than I am okay with today. Also, who is going to be able to touch me, how, when, and where? That's very important, because I might be okay with Michelle touching me on my head when we're in the studio filming the podcast, but where we're in a club, I might not want Michelle touching my head, because that might look a little weird if she's constantly doing this to me. And this, whether it's touching my private parts, whether it's touching my breasts, whether it's touching my ass, it doesn't matter what it is. I have a right to feel comfortable, and I have to define boundaries for those things in every situation. So I'm okay with certain people violating my personal space in certain situations. I'm okay with certain people violating touching boundaries in certain situations, or not really violating, but having different, I think is a better way of putting it, where when I am in my living room with 4 or 5 people, I am okay with having those people physically touch me, or touch me in certain ways, or touch my private parts, or touch my head, my face, my underarms, my feet. But when I'm out on the subway, I'm not okay with those same people touching my private parts, putting their fingers in my mouth, or doing certain, or rubbing my feet, because I don't feel comfortable now. So as long as I define that as what makes me feel good, not I don't want you to do this, it's I feel very comfortable having you rub my feet in the privacy of my home or in the park, but I don't want you rubbing my skanky feet on the subway. Or I'm not comfortable with you rubbing my feet on the subway is a better way of putting it. Not, I don't want you to do that. I'm not comfortable with it. So whatever that boundary is, and when we get to sexual boundaries, those are incredibly hard to define and constantly variables, because consent can always be taken away at any time under any situation, And we're constantly putting ourselves in situations when it comes to sexual and touching boundaries where we're using mood-altering substances, whether it's alcohol, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's illegal drugs. It doesn't matter what it is. Those all affect our mood, our desire, and our decision-making process. So I might have zero sexual boundaries when I'm in private with one of my partners, because I know and I trust that they will never do anything that's going to hurt or harm me that I don't like, and they know what I like and they don't like. So hopefully I don't have to put rules and boundaries up. But there's sort of an unknown boundary that I don't like pain, so we don't do pain, or they take the pain because they like pain. So that's kind of like an unspoken boundary, but that boundary came from years of experience. And how do I define that? Like, is it anybody that I do a BDSM scene with, somebody I want to have sex with? No.
So I also think, like, instead of saying just no to somebody, no, I don't want you to do that, it's better to say, I have a boundary and I really don't want anybody to cross it. Right? Because then that takes the responsibility on you. It's your boundary.
That's very important, because you are choosing to interact with that person and in a certain way. And that's your choice. You always have the right or choice, hopefully in most situations, to walk away. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to stay in that situation. You have every single right to move and leave and walk away and not be judged for that, and be able to stand firm and be confident in yourself that your feelings are true to yourself. And that if I love the way that this guy spanks me, but I really don't want to have unprotected sex with him because I don't trust him and I don't know where he's been, that's a true boundary that you were allowed to genuinely have. Even though every other girl that was right before you, let him do it. But that's your choice and your decision and your feelings. It's not them. And you don't have to be judging and comparing yourself to all those other people that just did that.
I have to say also, if you decide to not let him use the condom and you decide to, break your own boundary, you're going to feel really shitty on a bunch of different levels. One, for having sex with them unprotected, and two, because you violated your own boundary. Just think about how good you feel if you said, no, it crosses the line for me and I'm not going to do it. You get empowered. It's two different feelings, like good feelings and like yuck feelings.
And standing up for yourself gives you power, because then you know the consequences of what's going to happen. With the condom, for a lot of people, doesn't mean you have to take the morning after pill. Doesn't mean now that your spouse is going to find out. Doesn't mean now that you're going to have to go get your STD full panel test done. I mean, what is going to fundamentally happen when you make that decision? Because that individual just had sex with 7 other people without protection, and you don't know where those people have been. Now, that's a decision that you made. And we're just trying to justify and rationalize why I made that. But you don't have to justify or rationalize it. It's just, I don't do it. Hey, you don't have to tell them it's because you just slept with 9 other people. I don't play with people that don't have protected sex. Another rule is, I don't play with people that I'm not in love with. So you can make a decision that you're only going to have sex with one partner, but you might do scenes with 1 million other people, but your hard limit is penetration, or mouth, or oral. I mean, you have to set those rules and boundaries around what you're comfortable with and the situations that you're put yourself in. So you might be comfortable having sex with 1 million other people, but you're married to someone that is monogamous and purely wants to have sex with one person. You have to set a boundary that's comfortable for the both of you. You might be, and there's a lot of places in between that you can have discussions with your partner to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
And it changes. It's malleable. It's not written in stone. Everything kind of changes, not only over time, for yourself as you mature and grow and get more experiences, but also between the dynamic of that person that you're putting that boundary on.
And there were girls that I started hanging out with, and I was like, wow, I really want to get with them. And then, 20 years later, and I'm really good friends with them now, and like that's the last thing I'm like, ew, that would be gross, or so I created boundaries where, for me, fundamentally, creating that true bond and connection is more important than trying to get in your pants.
Yeah, and it all boils down to being your authentic self and being true to yourself and standing very firmly on the ground with your feet rooted in there and still looking up to the stars. But you have to have some integrity. Boundaries is definitely a big, huge part of having some integrity.
And they have to be based on realisticness. They have to be attainable boundaries. And they have to be boundaries based on society and everything. You have to think about it, because if you're creating a boundary that nobody else in the world is creating, and it's not attainable, and it's not realistic because you now have to change everybody else around your behavior, you have to expect lots and lots of setbacks. And you have to expect people not to accept it. So let's say I set a boundary that I only drive on the left side of the street, and now I'm in America. Everybody in America drives on the right side of the street, because my car is designed for the left side of the street.
Well, that's just unrealistic.
But that's, a lot of people set unrealistic boundaries in their life because they feel that they can create rules to change the situation they're in.
Okay, so but now it's a key word. You said rules and boundaries. They're two different things.
Correct. And
Okay.
that's what we're trying to get through to you here,
Yeah.
is that right now, your boundaries are about your actions and your activities, not about everybody else. Your boundaries are not going to change the way somebody else acts. Your boundaries are going to change the way you act with the person, or
Right.
choose no longer to communicate with the person because they keep stepping on your feel-good mojo.
Right, exactly. That. So it comes down to you having some sort of, it's not a wall, it's just like a little check-in sheet. If they're going to come through the gate, you just, you know, however they're coming into the gate of your life, that you have a little check-off sheet. I don't do X, Y, and Z, and this is, you know, X, Y, whatever.
And
One,
they're
two,
doing
three.
it. And you only point to, you don't have to tell people these are my boundaries. You don't have to say
No,
these are my rules.
it comes up, and like I said, don't get mad at them if they cross the boundary the first time.
Or the second time.
Or the second time. You have to tell somebody, listen, you know, this is my boundary and I just want you to respect it. If it starts to be the, you know, third, fourth, fifth time, you know, one time is a mistake. Second time you could totally forgive. Third time it's a pattern.
We also have to look at it when we start seeing that pattern. Is only one person violating our boundary, or are other people violating our boundary, and are they violating it in the same or a different way? Because then we have to really look at that boundary and look at the root of where that boundary came from. Are we setting boundaries because we want to set boundaries, or are we setting boundaries because that's our family or our construct's expectation? That's when we start to really get into the ability to set boundaries. Because for me, I can't set a boundary based on my parents' expectation. I can't set a boundary based on my children's expectation. I can't set a boundary based on my wife's expectation. But I can set a boundary based on my own life experience and expectation, because it's true and authentic, and it makes it realistic.
So I just want to give a little shout out again to our sponsor, headshop.com, HEADSHOP.com. This is Free and Open Minds.
Who are you?
And where are you going?
And we're going to be continuing this boundaries discussion over the next couple of episodes. And there's going to be a link in the show notes to a page that has a bunch of resources that we've collected over the past couple of years. Basically just links to either articles, podcasts, or other Vcasts to help you set boundaries and understand boundaries for yourself. I'm Hardy Brooklyn.
And I'm Michelle Wild.
Thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.